Welcome to The Business Strategist, the show for CEOs and founders ready to scale fast, lead smarter, and build a business that doesn't rely on them. I'm Adam Strong, award-winning strategist, former elite athlete, international speaker, and 3 times best-selling author. After 3 decades in business, I know exactly what it takes to grow, scale, and exit with impact. Each week, I dive into real conversations with industry experts, bold entrepreneurs, and clients navigating the uphill struggles of business, giving you the tools and the strategies to create more profit, more freedom, and more impact. Let's get into it. Hey guys, I just wanted to grab your attention because we've just created a brand new resource for you guys called the Exit Playbook, how to shift from operator to visionary leader. Now, this was based on a podcast that I did a few months ago and is the leadership blueprint for being able to help yourself successfully exit your business. Now, we go into many different things. We're going into some of the common symptoms of why founders get trapped in operations and what to look for and the impact that it actually has on you. We also go into some deep dive exercises that addresses some of the fears, some of the reflections, also how to basically let go of some of the control that you have, but more importantly, how to shift your identity within your business and how to align your strategy to your exit and how to challenge your belief systems, more importantly. Listen, it is a free playbook. The link is in the show description notes. Enjoy. I think you're going to find it a really useful resource. Take care.
As a chef, I know flavor doesn't begin in the kitchen. It begins on the land. And Westhome's nature-led Australian Wagyu is a story written in the landscape of Northern Australia. Cooking is storytelling, and Westhome Wagyu carries a story of Northern Australia itself. Raw, powerful, and deeply authentic. It's a testament to the passion and care raised in the rhythm of Northern Australia. I'm Chef Maylin from 88 Club in Los Angeles, and I invite you to visit westhome.com/Maylin to learn more. And taste a story only Westhome nature-led Australian Wagyu can tell. That's westhome.com/MEILIN.
What if everything that you knew about marketing was completely wrong? That connection is by far better than perfection, and that the future of marketing might just be a little bit more human than you ever thought. Well, in today's episode, we have my very good friend, Mr. Phil Tragus Evans. Now, Phil is the co-founder of the award-winning agency, Giraffe Social, and is the author of the best-selling book, Human First Marketing. And, I brought Phil onto today because, the world is in a really funny place right now, but the world is also changing at such a rapid pace with AI coming in and the fact that, I'm on LinkedIn a lot of the time and I'm seeing so many AI generated posts that it takes the whole kind of human element out of it. But also you have to be very careful in terms of authenticity. Now, things that we're going to be covering about today, ladies and gents, is yes, we're going to be talking about human-based marketing, whatever that means. And we're going to have a conversation around that. We're going to talk about Phil's book, of course. We're going to talk a little bit about AI because I think it's a very topic. We're going to talk about how to use that to your advantage, but also the kind of, I suppose, the pros and cons and how you can integrate that into the kind of humanistic side of marketing as well. Also, Phil's going to be doing a coaching session with myself. He's already done a bit of due diligence on my personal brand, and he's going to be answering some of my questions. So what I would endorse you to do, ladies and gents, is to make sure that you got your pen and paper handy. And I want you to imagine that Phil's actually in the room with you, okay? Think about some of the questions that he's going to ask me. Think of it as if he's asking you, okay? Because there again, this podcast is more around disrupting your belief systems, more importantly, but also to give you really deep insight. So without further ado, Phil, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Adam. That was quite the intro. I appreciate it.
No worries. All good. Looking forward to today's jam, my friend.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Good. And it's interesting because I know that we were connected when you reached out to me and then because your book hasn't been out that long, is it?
No, a couple of months.
Yeah. And then we had Robin Waite here on the show. And then obviously you're good friends with Robin, right?
Yeah. So me and Robin go back a little while, and he was actually really helpful during the writing of the book and gave me lots of feedback and advice. And yeah, he was a really massive help.
Yeah, he's a good egg. We like Robin. He's a good egg. He's a good
Yeah,
egg.
he's really, really nice.
Cool. Let's jump into today. So human-based marketing. Let's get some context around what that basically means. First of all, what is human-first marketing and what is not human-first marketing? I just want to get some clarity around that because I think there's some ideologies of what that potentially is, but I guess we've probably got our own opinions. What's your thoughts?
Sure. So for me, human-first marketing is when you start with humans. So when you're looking at your marketing strategy and you start with, okay, who are we speaking to? Let me understand my customer or my potential customer in more depth. But also it's about how do I leverage my own personal brand? Or if you're a company, how do I leverage my team so that my team can be involved in my marketing? Really, it's about putting people before metrics, but still focusing on getting the performance. It could come across a little bit sort of new age. But really it's the opposite. It's actually quite a timeless strategy because if you think about businesses and marketing, decades ago, it was more local and it was more like, you knew the name of your local butcher and the person who worked in the cafe and like all these sorts of things. So it's kind of almost going back to that sort of relationship focused marketing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, when I think of the word human first marketing, I mean, because I live on LinkedIn, you know that I play on LinkedIn a lot, and they always talk about, authenticity and vulnerability and that kind of stuff. Yet there's this kind of what I call controversial, I suppose, hypocritical attitude, especially with the importance of AI coming in. And it kind of like, well, what is it? Is it human-based marketing or is it AI-based marketing? Like, what is it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's tough. And I think there's a temptation because of how good AI is to overuse it. But for marketers, for me, there's an opportunity. I think the more that people use AI to write their posts and to, draft up images and videos and these sorts of things, there's more of an opportunity if you do go a human first route because that's the thing that can't be replicated.
Yeah.
No other business has the exact team that you have, the makeup and experiences of that team. And same with personal brands. No one's had your journey, your experience. So I think the more you lean into AI, the more homogenized and generic everything becomes. Yeah. And I think the more you say, actually, I'm going to focus on just being me and getting my face out there and being a person and speaking to other people, the more you're going to stand out. And I think that's just going to increase over the next few years.
When you, when a client comes to you or a prospect comes to you and you evaluate their authenticity score, what do you look for?
Yeah, it's tricky. Authenticity is one of those buzzwords in marketing that has kind of been said so many times that it almost doesn't mean anything anymore.
Correct.
And I think authenticity means something different to everyone. But really, when you strip it back, it's just about being real.
Yeah.
And we saw this during the pandemic. I think that's probably one of the best examples. So during the pandemic, we had a supply and demand problem in the marketing world. And that was the demand for content was never greater because people were spending 2-3 times as much time on their phone scrolling through social. But we also had a supply problem because we were all stuck at home and couldn't film highly polished, the sort of normal marketing video content or photo content that we're used to doing. So what happened was we had to adapt as marketers and we started to create content that was a little bit more raw, a bit rough around the edges, more real. And something weird happened. People loved it and the engagement went up. And we've seen that continue since the pandemic, that people refer to it as lo-fi style content where it isn't highly polished. You're not in a studio and perfectly lit. You're filming on your phone and there's not a script. It's just you talking and being real. We're still seeing that. And I think for me, that's what authenticity is being yourself and not trying to present a sort of overly polished, fake version of yourself or your business or your brand on social media.
I think that there's, I think the barriers to entry as well with regards to, authenticity and creating really good content is actually much lower than it ever has been, if I'm honest with you. 4 or 5 years ago, we created a digital summit, right? And to me, it wasn't about making money. It was about helping people, genuinely helping people. Sure. But as off the back of that, my brand blew up because there was this, oh wow, this person's come out of the woodworm. Like, no government's here to save us from our business, but this guy could, type of a mindset, So again, it's just a great way to, and I do feel like there is the importance as we move from the industrial revolution into the digital revolution, that, we continue to have a fine balance between creating good content, building digital assets, and building human connections. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I agree that there's never been less barriers to entry when it comes to building a brand or a business or creating content. And I think some people resist sort of creating content because they're in that sort of place of, it has to be perfect, it has to be perfectly lit, and I have to have, a really high quality, SLR camera or these sorts of things. And the reality is you don't. Some of the best content that we've produced for some of our clients or for myself has been just shot on a phone, really raw. The example I always give is the brand Coco Chanel, who they spend millions creating this advert for one of their new fragrances, and it's transnational. It's in Paris, and then it's in Rome, and there's all these models, and it's lighting. But whilst they were doing it, they had someone just film on their phone the behind the scenes of the making of it, and that video outperformed the actual commercial. So you sort of think, oh my God, what are we doing? Why are we spending millions of dollars on this?
Absolutely. Very cool. Now, what I'm going to say to you, kind of reading a bit through your book and what you preach on social media is that you say that unpolished content wins, basically. And, we talk about authenticity and sharing vulnerability. And isn't that really just kind of another tactic that people are jumping on now? I feel like there's only a small minority of people that are creating unpolished content. We're in the currency of grabbing people's attention. I think it's becoming a battlefield more than anything else. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, there's still an element of needing to have a strategy and needing to have a plan for your content. I don't think it's enough to just film yourself and put something. You need to have an intention and think, well, what is it I'm trying to say? Who am I speaking to? What are the key messages I want them to know? It is tricky. I was speaking to someone the other day, and he highlighted something about something I do on LinkedIn, which I thought, oh, that's cool. Like, I didn't even realize I was doing that. So my wife is a very talented photographer, and she works around the world. So she photographs weddings, hotels, cool. Lifestyle, fashion stuff. So I'm very fortunate because I get to travel around the world carrying her bags. It's an important job, and, I'm proud to do it. But I always post about it when I'm traveling. And I could so easily try and pretend like I'm living some glamorous entrepreneurial life where, I'm flying around the world off the back of my sort of, prowess as an entrepreneur. And I never do, because it's not true. I'm traveling the world because my wife's insanely talented, and I'm lucky that I've married someone who's happened to bring me along with her.
Yeah.
So, that's a good example of authenticity of, okay, I could leverage that and try and, you think of the personal brand expert standing next to a Bentley that isn't theirs, pretending it is, sort of thing. But it's not real. And I think people won't stop, and they will just scroll past that stuff because their social feeds are full of it. And I think it's refreshing when someone's actually real about what's actually happening in their life, the good and the bad.
100%. One thing that I'm a big fan of is, taking the mask off. That's not so easy for a lot of people because the biggest fear is the fear of being judged.
Yeah.
And that's being judged by others, right? That's the biggest fear of the reasons why people are not as honest. And let's just face it, social media is a big mirage of bullshit. And it's not just bullshit, but it's not a reality that is true to their values. And it's just not in tune with their reality, full stop. But guess what? Who am I here to judge? So that's kind of my analogy.
Yeah, I think you touched on a few things there. I think social media can be a really evil place. There's no getting away from it. I do think we've started to move in a slightly better direction over the last couple of years. And I think part of that is because people are craving something more real. I think we're
Mm-hmm.
moving away from it, from being sort of photoshopped and airbrushed and these sorts of things. But I get the fear of judgment. I think you might look at my LinkedIn and think, oh, Phil's just like extra. No, I'm really introverted, and
Yeah.
I'm quite a private person, and so it's not in my nature to be like, oh, let me post about myself today, or my book, or what I'm doing, or go on a podcast. But it's I think getting out of your comfort zone sometimes is important, but I think
Yes.
also understanding your own strengths. I think I talked about this recently in a post, when more in focus of like employee advocacy, but understand what your strengths are. And there's a bit in the book where I kind of talk about the different types of communication and sort of what's in your comfort zone, what's out of your comfort zone, what's impactful, what's not impactful, and trying to find almost like a Venn diagram of focusing in. So you might not be someone who loves to post to social, but you might be an excellent writer. So maybe write blog posts or write a book or a white paper. You might be someone who can't write, but you love speaking. Get on the stage, do some talks. Like, I think understand yourself and sort of lean into those things. Like, I love having conversations. That's my favorite part of my job, is this, having conversations with interesting people. So, getting on stage, not exactly my bag, although I keep being asked to do it. So I probably will end up doing it a little bit. But this is my sweet spot for me, with like high impact, but also high comfort. I enjoy doing this.
Nice. Very cool. Now, one thing that I know about you is that you kind of, in your book, you talk about, you dropped the whole kind of customer avatar analogy and build what we call the empath framework. And now, really, in a nutshell, is this just like a smarter tool, or is it just kind of something that you've, recreated and rebranded, but it's really the same thing? Tell us a little bit more about the framework.
Sure. So the first confession is that I love an acronym. I think anywhere I can put an acronym on something and say it's a framework, I will do it. So the Empath framework came away because I have made more customer avatars in my lifetime than I can remember. I wouldn't go so far as to say they're not valuable, because I think they are. And I think if you're not, they're better than doing nothing and just putting out content, I think. But they do tend to focus more on sort of demographics, age groups, gender, locations, and these sorts of things. And I think what you end up doing when you do that is you're stripping away the humanity, and you're stripping away the fact that these are real people. These aren't data points on, meta targeting or whatever. Like, these are real people who have lives and feelings and are going about their day. So obviously, it's not possible to speak to every single one of your potential customers and understand them all and create custom marketing strategies for every single one of them. But what the Empath framework does is it allows you to view your customers through a more humanistic kind of fashion. So this is where I always have to try and remember what each of the letters stand for. But the E is emotional understanding and thinking about what emotions they're feeling. How are they feeling when they're looking for your product or service? The M is market and trends. So what's happening in the world at the moment, what's happening in their world at the moment, and understanding that. The P is patterns of behavior. So how do these people operate? Do they, are they someone who goes, when they're making a decision, they want to speak to people? Do they look at reviews? Do they look at a website 10 times before making a purchase? Like, what are the commonalities in behavior? A is the audience feedback. So this is actually speaking to your customers. Shocking, I know, it's a pretty revolutionary idea. But, most customer avatars, that process doesn't happen. You just sort of go, well, our customers are typically this age and blah, blah, blah. And it's amazing when you actually speak to them, what you learn. I did it recently for Giraffe and speaking to some of our clients about, how did you find us? What were the things you liked? What were the red flags? Was there anything you were concerned about? And oh my God, so enlightening. Like, take the time to speak to your customers. It's probably the most valuable thing you can do. The T is team feedback. So especially in a company, often the people who understand your customers best are the people who are dealing with them day to day. So whether that's from a sales function or a sort of customer service function, they understand your customers better than the founder who doesn't speak to customers anymore and doesn't do sales anymore. And, so that's really important. And then the H is, what's the outcome? So you create this sort of human understanding map from the first 5 sources that give you a much more human sort of idea of who your customers is, how they're feeling, what they're going through, how they behave. And then you can start building a strategy from there.
With the whole kind of persona thing, and I totally hear you. I think that with, working with some clients as well, which are looking to build brands, I feel like demographics are kind of like, if we take a cake, it's like the icing on the top, but actually the deeper parts around kind of trigger points and psychology and stuff like that. Would you say that's part of kind of the empath framework as well?
Yeah, exactly. So there's an example I always like to give, and it's pretty famous in the marketing world, of two sort of customer avatars next to each other that have the same age, they were born in the same area, they had the same interests, and it all matches up. And you think, well, these are the same people, you should have the same marketing strategy. And then it reveals that one of them is King Charles and one of them is Ozzy Osbourne. So, and obviously these are really different people. They seem the same when you look at just the demographic data. Yeah. But, what appeals to Ozzy Osbourne, I would argue probably won't appeal to King Charles and vice versa. So this is why, you're completely right. You have to go deeper than just ages, genders, locations, what they're interested in. Like, you need to go a bit deeper than that. And the marketing you create as a result will have a deeper impact as a result of that research.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, I'll have to think about that train of thought now. It's going to bug me.
It's going to come back to you later. Yeah.
When you get those aha moments, and sometimes when you got that train of thought, normally I write these things down, and I've got my notebook and pen handy in front of me, and I've just forgotten to do it because it was kind of like a split-second aha moment. But anyway.
Look, Adam, it's very, very authentic and human of you to
thank you.
Forget something. So, kudos to you.
I appreciate
it's
that.
The ultimate get out of jail card.
It is
being authentic.
America leads the world in medicine development. It matters. We get new medicines first, nearly 3 years faster. 5 million Americans go to work because we make medicines here at home. And not relying on other countries keeps us safe. But China is racing to overtake us. Will we let them, or will we choose to stay ahead? When America leads, America cures. Let's tell Washington to keep us in the lead.
Learn how at americacures.com. Paid for by pharma.
Yeah, it's all good. From your perspective, how do brands stay more human without kind of falling behind? Because, because AI is doing the heavy lifting, but AI is ultimately a computer. It's not human. So like when you create content or you consult with clients of yours, does this question often come up quite often? Like, with all these different tools, and there are some really, really good tools. They really are. But then there are also people that are using ChatGPT, for example, to create their posts. And straight away that actually, as much as they're nice people, they're also lazy bastards because they haven't actually spent the fucking time to actually create really good content. So one of my rituals, Phil, is in every morning, I wouldn't say every morning, probably say 4 or 5 times a day, I spend good 30 minutes just writing. Now, I'm actually slightly dyslexic. And one of the I like to create audio and video content. That's kind of my thing, right? But I also realized that actually writing is a skill that everyone needs to, regardless of if you're dyslexic or whatever. But I feel like just by when you're going to the gym, for example, you go to the gym, you don't see results, obviously, after a first session, but you have to keep going for repetition. Like then it becomes the master of all skill. And then you start to see the transformation of results. I see writing as the same way. The more that you write, the better you get, the more that connection you get. But I guess going back to my question, like, how do brands stay more human without falling behind in the whole kind of AI space as well?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it is something clients ask us about and something that we're thinking about a lot at the moment. There's a lot of meetings going on internally as to how are we going to use AI? How are we not going to use AI? And I think when people know me as the human first guy, they assume I just, hate AI and think it's the devil and you shouldn't use it. And But that's not true. I use AI every single day. I think everyone does at this point. It's just how you use it. And I agree with what you were saying that, use AI to do the heavy lifting, to do the data analysis, to take notes, to summarize things. And, one of the ways that I've used AI that has been really effective is as a sparring partner to say, hey, I think I'm thinking about this, and this is what I think. What am I missing? What are my blind spots? Am I missing something here? And then almost have an argument about it and sort of come out of it with, okay, I've sort of really organized my thoughts there in having this conversation. So I think there's countless ways you can use it. And I also think that when it comes to writing posts with something like ChatGPT, and I agree with you, you can usually tell. But I also think there's a bit of a removal of nuance with that, in the sense that people view it in quite a polar way, in terms of it's either you use ChatGPT, bad, you don't use it, good. And there's a whole spectrum between those two things. Some people, you use the example of you with dyslexia. So some people might find it that actually it's really helpful for me to put down all my ideas and thoughts into ChatGPT and have it structure it and just make sure the spelling's right and that it reads well. It's still their ideas. It's just been structured by a tool. So it's difficult. And I don't really know how it's going to shake out yet. But I think one of the things that I'm a big proponent of is transparency. And I think, this is something I say to our clients all the time is, yes, if you want to use AI in your marketing, okay, fair enough. So let's tell people that we are. Let's not try and pretend that this avatar that we've created is a real person. Let's acknowledge that it's not. Because as you say, people see through it.
Yeah.
And trust is the currency now of everything when it comes to marketing. And if you are not owning the fact that you're using AI and trying to pretend like you're not, and people know you're not, you're going to lose trust and people will just check out. So, own it. If you're going to use it, own it and say, look, we're using it for this, we're using it for that. Like, we're in the process of drafting our own AI policy in our agency that's going to be public. This is how we use it. This is how we don't use it, so that it's there for everyone to see. And I think that's something most businesses will need to do in the next couple of years, is in the same way that you have a privacy policy or something at the bottom of the website, you'll need to have an AI policy that sort of makes it clear what you're using it for and how.
Yeah, it's like a kind of a disclosure thing. And I think that's a really good point, actually. I think we're a bit far behind with that at the moment, but give it a few years, I think we're going to start seeing that, definitely.
Yeah. I think we're already starting to see it where, as the line blurs, where it becomes harder to know if something's AI generated. We need to know. I think this is important. Because it comes back to what we talked about earlier of authenticity. And, if you can AI generate something and people think, oh, that's real, but it's not, that feels a little bit dangerous and disingenuous.
I was going to say to you, community, one of the things that I think is extremely underrated skill in marketing. I don't think we talk about it enough personally. From your perspective, like, what's the framework or playbook for building it in 2025 specifically? Like, when everyone's so kind of distracted with LinkedIn algorithms and platforms that are saturated with bullshit content, how does one build community? And actually, is it like, when you are working with clients and you're advising them, hey, this will be a great way to build community, what are you sort of saying to them? Like, is there a strategy to go about doing that? I'd be interested to know, because I think there are some of the big influencers on LinkedIn that do it really well, but I guess we all have our different tactics and strategies. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's one of the most overlooked tools, especially on social media. And I can probably count on one hand how many times a brand has got in touch with Giraffe to say, we need some help, figuring out our community strategy. It's always posting. People focus on what are we posting? Why are we posting it? What does it achieve? But we have to remember that social media is a two-way, it's sort of the introduction of two-way marketing. And if you're just posting, that's not a conversation. That's a monologue. That's shouting, and people don't want to be shouted at. They want to have conversations and feel like they're in the room and have value. So when someone says to me that, oh, my posts aren't getting that much engagement, what do you think I should do with my posts? I always say the same thing. And I say, forget your posts, go out and comment on other people's posts. Go be active in the community and be targeted. Think about, who do I want to speak to? Pick out, whether it's clients you have, team members you have, prospective clients that you'd love to work with, influencers in your industry, and be in the conversation, show up in that fashion, because with social, you really do get what you give. And if you're just posting and you're not engaging others, and then you're going to sit there and say, look, I'm not getting an engagement, this isn't working. Well, if you're not giving, you're not going to get. So stop worrying about your posts, get out there and start having conversations.
I talked about this last week on a solo episode, and I said, the people that do it well on places like LinkedIn, for example, they give more rather than take more.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important. There's an old saying by a guy called Jim Rohn, and Jim Rohn talks a lot about the more that you help people achieve their goals, the more that you achieve your goals.
Yeah.
And it comes back to you 10x, like the universe rewards what you reward, without getting kind of too woo-woo, by the way, ladies and gents.
It's all about vibes, Adam.
Vibes. I love that. Vibes.
That's sort of the theory of social capital, isn't it? It's like you're building social capital by being out there and rewarding other people's content. And the thing with LinkedIn especially is that if you don't have a large following, you might get more reach on a comment than you would on a post. If you pick the right post to comment on and you say something of value or entertaining and it gets engagement, I've seen clients blow up on LinkedIn because they have a really good commenting strategy rather than a posting strategy.
I've now thought about my epiphany that I had from earlier. Now I've written it down.
You've really built this up now, though.
I've really built this up. Yeah. I've really built this up. So one thing that I have noticed, right, especially with a lot of our listeners that are listening in right now, is that, so there is a belief system that, you can build a business in a million different ways. Bit like building the Leaning Tower of Pisa or Rome or whatever it is. Like, you could build it really in many different ways. And one of the things that I have observed, I'll call it observed, is that you'll get maybe, I don't know, a law firm or an accountant or whatever it might be. So a lot of our listeners that are here listening to us right now is that they feel like they don't have enough time for creating content, or they don't see the value of building content. They use the same strategy that they have done for the last 10 or 15 years, which is go to networking meetings, become part of their associations or chamber of commerces, and rely on referrals and recommendations. Used to believe that, okay? Obviously, I don't, because I'm a content creator and I have been for like at least 5+ years. What advice would you have for those individuals or companies that still have that same attitude of there is really not any value in delivering content, in creating content, because it takes too much of my time, but they also see the value in it? Like, there's this fine balance. Any advice?
Yeah. I hate networking events. I went to a few when we started the business 13 years ago, and I said to my business partner, I'm never going to do this ever again. I get that there are good networking events and maybe I'm missing out, but there's my sort of analogy is a networking event is kind of like a room full of people who turned up thinking they were going to eat a delicious meal, but everyone else is thinking that you're going to cook it. Everyone's there for this meal that they're going to have, but everyone else is also expecting you to make it. It's the reality that those people haven't gone, let me sign up to a networking event because I want to go and buy some products and services. I really want to find things to buy and spend money on. They're going there to sell you something, which, it does make it a bit tricky. And as I say, I know lots of people who go to networking events and say, Phil, they're amazing and really helpful, and I'm sure they are. What I would say is, in terms of creating content, it can be time consuming, but I would say focus less on the content and more on the relationships. Don't worry about, putting out loads and loads of content. Understand who your audience is, understand what they need, and then provide it to them. Yeah. Whether that's, advice, you talked about solicitors, an absolute black box of knowledge that unless you're a solicitor, it's all, I mean, I studied law at college and I still don't know anything about it, I don't know how I got a C, to be honest with you. It's baffling. But it's, find those people and understand them and their pain and their struggle and what they're trying to figure out, and then solve it for them with your content. Don't just post on LinkedIn and say, we deliver this service and, we do this and we do that, because who cares? Who gives a shit?
Yeah.
No one. Find out what it is they need to know and give it to them, because there's that whole sort of idea of the freemium model of, well, if this is what they're giving away for free, imagine how good it must be if you're one of their clients. So yeah, that's kind of my advice is, and not just that, but also these days people are checking businesses out on social.
Oh my God, yes. I so believe that.
Yeah, they're not just going to Google and saying, I need a solicitor. They're going, okay, well, is that solicitor on LinkedIn?
Yeah.
Are they active? Have they are people posting about it? Social is becoming search. The lines are being blurred. So if you have a really bad social presence and people check it out, they're going to make assumptions. So you kind of need to have your house in order.
Yeah. It's a really interesting point you made there, actually. I'll share my train of thought towards the end. But no, but it's true that what you were saying is absolutely 100% true. Now, what I was going to say to you, especially in kind of I don't like to use the word, B2C or B2B. For me, it's B2H, business to human. We're all human beings. It doesn't matter if you're running an 8-figure or billion-dollar company or your one-man band. Ultimately, we're human beings.
Mm.
Now, how do you apply a human first thinking when you're selling to decision makers, for example, who are really only looking for return on investment? And there's a fine line. I was many years ago, I was in the world of corporate well-being. And so I was speaking with a lot of heads of HR and a lot of decision makers, and they really didn't give a shit about my story that much. They were only really interested in, what's that going to do for our company? What is that look on paper for us? What is the profit? What is the real fact? How do you, because I know for a fact that there are listeners here that are looking to what I call hunt down elephants rather than hunt rabbits, which could be a corporate deal. Any advice for you?
Yeah, so I completely agree with what you're saying, that, and I say this so much that I should probably get it tattooed on me at this point, but that businesses are just a group of people trying to provide value to another group of people. And I think we lose sight of that sometimes, and we hide behind logos and corporate facades, and we hide our customers behind data points and metrics and spreadsheets. But really, when you get down to it, it's just people on people. And that, it might seem counterintuitive, but I actually think human first marketing works better for B2B than it does for B2C. And a lot of our biggest clients at Giraffe are B2B brands that are interested in doing this. And I think when it comes to hunting elephants, which I don't endorse, just in case this gets clipped, when I think about the biggest clients that we've signed at Giraffe, and I did this recently, and I try and spot what's the patterns. The pattern between all of those things was a relationship. And when you're dealing with a big brand and you're dealing with someone who's very senior, whatever it is you're selling, whether it's services like ours, like a marketing agency, or whatever it is you're selling, you have to remember that person is staking their reputation on that decision. They're going to have to go to a board and say, I've spent money on X. This is what we got from it. And they don't want to look stupid. So trust is everything. They need to think, this person gets what we're doing. They understand me. I believe them. So when it comes to those really big clients or big deals, it's relationships. It's the whole who you know sort of thing. And it really is. So yeah, I think the big argument for those sorts of brands with Human First is this is all about trust and relationships, and that they're not going to have a relationship and trust with you if everything's AI generated and they don't know who you are and they don't see your face and they don't know what you think on things. And, trust comes from visibility. So you need to be visible.
Yeah. And I'm all a big fan of the numbers, but I do feel like really in a nutshell, as you mentioned, it's all about trust. Ultimately, we do business with people that we like, know, and trust. We've heard that before, right?
Yeah.
So,
I
by
think
the way,
that quote's been attributed to about 50 different people, I think, as well, by the way.
100%. By the way, for full disclosure for you listeners, by the way, no animal activists were harmed in this episode. So
The episode hasn't finished yet, Adam.
No, that's true. That's true. Now, I know that we're kind of like coming towards the end of our conversation and stuff. But yeah, I mean, your book, and you talk about some pretty intense life lessons, don't you? And some insights, early mornings, self-doubt, discomfort, and whatever it is. But what did the process of writing the book do for you? What did it teach about you and the message and things like that? Were there any kind of, I guess there must have been a million of aha moments, but what were the kind of like top three for you?
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
I think you touched on it earlier when you were talking about the importance of writing. The book, in some ways, was a bit of a selfish endeavor because I had this idea of human first marketing, and I had lots of ideas of what that meant and how you would do that, but it was just chaos in my head, So having to write a book that didn't just read like the scribblings of a madman forced me to organize my ideas, create frameworks, create structure. So writing the book was really helpful because I was kind of having to, because this is a new area. This isn't like I'm writing about something that has existed forever. So I'm sort of having to question myself and think, okay, well, I think that, but why do I think that? Is there any psychological or sociological evidence that supports that? Like, why is it working? And I'm in a privileged position because, I run a decent sized social media agency. So these are tactics and strategies that we are deploying with big brands, and we're seeing it in real time, what's working. So I was able to sort of think, well, what if we did this? And then the next week, go and try it and be like, oh, that really worked well. Like, that should go in the book. So yeah, the writing of the book was really helpful. But the other side of that is that I'd never written a book before. So I was learning it as I went, and in the interest of being human first about it, I shared everything on LinkedIn, like you say, the struggles, the good, the bad, the ugly. And what was really special about that was that I built an audience, or community, if you will, of people who were engaged and invested. And so when the book came out, it became a bestseller because there was hundreds of people that had followed the journey of me writing it who wanted to read it. So yeah, it was kind of proof in the pudding sort of situation.
Definitely. Now we've only got a few more minutes, but I wanted to use this opportunity as kind of for me and my listeners. And we talked about a coaching element. So we're going to, guys, for you listening in, by the way, we're going to go into coaching mode. Phil's going to go into coaching mode just for a few minutes. And I don't know where you want to start. Maybe there are some questions that, and I'd love to get your, I suppose, call it opinions if you want, about kind of my humanistic and how authentic I'm showing up and things like that. And what are the things that I need to look for?
Yeah, so I obviously had a good look at your LinkedIn before this call, and frustratingly, you're pretty good. But I guess I can sort of walk you through some of the questions that if I was speaking to someone about their personal brand, that I would say, these are things we maybe need to think about.
Sounds good.
So the first question I always like to ask is that if people were talking about you and you weren't in the room, what do you hope they're saying about you? What do you hope is kind of their thoughts on Adam Strong?
Well, that's a good question. I hope that it's not bad thoughts. I think from my perspective, like my big thing is all about around building legacy. When you've been in business for a long time, making money, that's important, but it's not nearly as important as building legacy and building purpose more than anything else. Like for me, I want people to, when they think of me, I want them to think, okay, this is the guy that helps people to scale and exit their business. Like,
right.
That is 100%. That's what drives me. That gets me out of bed. That's my passion.
Love that.
Yeah.
So what would you say it is that believe or have lived that makes your perspective sort of genuinely different in this space?
Well, I mean, a lot of people will know, especially for a lot of our regular listeners, is they'll know that my backstory. They'll know that I started up my first business aged 11. So I have a 30 years of experience.
Was it washing cars, right?
Golf balls, actually. Golf balls.
Oh,
golf balls.
Nice.
Yeah. The car washing business was actually my second business.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah. So, but yeah, good observation though. But yeah, I think it's kind of a combination of my experience and stories, but also the fact that I've been in multiple industries. I've developed some really core strategies, but also being an athlete as well, an ex-former elite athlete. I've developed some core, what I'd call habits and self-discipline, call it frameworks, if you want to call it that helps me to not just stay focused, but it helps me to be on my toes. And so again, I can then duplicate that and bring it over into business. I think for me, what I really love, my big superpower, is just taking a complex idea and making it super simple.
Love that.
Yeah.
So is there any stories, beliefs, or opinions that you have held back from sharing that maybe would create an even stronger connection if you were open about?
I think I'm a pretty open book, if I'm
I have
honest
to admit,
with you.
when I looked through your LinkedIn, I was like, he's pretty good at this.
So one of the things that I used to do is I used to just create educational based content, but now I kind of like intertwine that into personal storytelling, because again, I think it gives people insight, but it's kind of like from my personal experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, this is how I did it, but you can also do it the same way if you follow the same framework type thing. So I'm kind of like empowering people in a way.
Yeah. No, I like that.
Yeah.
And do you feel like that is coming across in your content? Do you feel like people like that sort of storytelling element where it's not just something you say, it's something you show? Do you feel like you're creating content that really gets that across in like an emotional storytelling kind of way?
I think yes and no. The reason I say that is because, I don't know if you ever create a piece of content and for whatever reason, it didn't get the traction or it didn't raise the expectation that you expected it, yet you spend hours and hours and hours on it.
Yeah.
And it just flopped. And so don't want to raise my expectations too high, but also ultimately, I also think to myself, well, how can I be better? How can I connect better? How can I build trust better? But for you guys that are listening in, by the way, I hope that actually some of the questions that Phil's asking me, these are actually good questions for you guys. Phil, I know we've got to cut short and things like that. But first of all, I wanted to say thank you so much for today. It's been a great conversation. What do you think?
Yeah, absolute privilege to be on with you, Adam.
Very good, very good. And for you guys, by the way, that are interested to learn more about the humanistic side of marketing and social media, feel free to go connect with Phil. We've put all his social media links below. There's some gifts and whatever it might be. Check out his book over on Amazon, of course. So there's some really cool stuff in there as well. If you have any questions, by the way, feel free to reach out to him or myself. As I say this to everybody, if this is the very first time that you're listening to the podcast, do me a favor, make sure that you hit the subscribe or the follow button. Okay, leave a comment, say hi. Don't be a lurker, right? But I love lurkers, okay, because they tend to come out the woodwork when you least expect it. So
you get what you give, right? Let's go full circle here.
100%, definitely. Anyway, from me and Phil, thanks so much, and hopefully we'll see you again on the Business Strategist. Take care, and speak to you soon. Cheers.
Rinse knows that greatness takes time, but so does laundry. So Rinse will take your laundry and hand deliver it to your door expertly cleaned. And you can take the time pursuing your passions. Time once spent sorting and waiting, folding and queuing, now spent challenging and innovating and pushing your way to greatness. So pick up the Irish flute or those calligraphy pens or that daunting beef Wellington recipe card and leave the laundry to us. Rinse. It's time to be great.